Hello, this is Greg Allison from Green Greg's Garden and Worm Farm. Today I have a special guest, Inventor Lee Wheelbarger. Lee Wheelbarger has been quite involved in a number of your three-letter agencies and is quite the inventor. In fact, he is sitting on Electric Blue, which is the largest electric yacht in the world. Lee, tell us about yourself and tell us about your yacht there. Tell us about your background. And then what we're going to go into, folks, though, is we're going to talk about an announcement of potential Chinese weapons that could cause EMP that may already be in place here in the United States. Then just for fun, we're going to talk about 5G. Back to you, Lee. Say a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I started my career at a young age. I invented the helmet cam for the U.S. Army Telemedical Command. That was the world's first man-portable full duplex video audio data transceiver system that could transmit video, audio, and data from any point on the surface of the planet to any point on the surface of the planet in a 15.5-pound package. So that got my start doing things for DoD. That device was used with the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Army, a little bit with the U.S. Navy SEALs. After doing that, I was brought into Fort Benning, Georgia, where I was the senior technologist for the Dismounted Battle Space Battle Lab. I worked on Land Warrior, Digitized Soldier, Force 21, Land Warrior, Net Warrior. That's all the computer systems that are on the soldier themselves, along with the heads-up display. I've worked at CCOM Communications and Electronics Command at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. I was in the Pulse Power building, which is where we actually tested EMP energies against our communications packages. So I've got direct experience in EMP testing, as well as I've been an advisor on the Congressional Oversight Committee that oversaw the EMP Commission, as well as an advisor to the Texas EMP Commission. So this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. And like you, I'm also a fan of Dr. Arthur Bradley, so I look forward to seeing your interview with him.
Yes, and Arthur Bradley will be on our program next, and then General Ken Krosniak will be on the channel. So, in fact, I've had both Arthur Bradley and General Ken Krosniak at my Power Grid Defense Conferences in the past. I have chaired two of these, along with Dr. Peter Vincent Pride, who I just had on my channel, and Command Sergeant Major Mike Mabey, who was on my channel a few months ago. So, definitely I'm in the forefront here of a lot of your YouTube channels and trying to get the power grid hardened. I don't know anybody else on a YouTube channel that's trying as hard as I am to actually get the grid hardened. But sometimes you need to understand and appreciate the threats to the grid to get people to take the action they need to do to get it hardened. All that said, what I want, let me back off just for a second here to say, if you on this channel, the purpose that I propose to my viewers is to help you survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. And this is part of my little new series I call Eyes Wide Open, Head on a Swivel, because you need to know what's coming at you. So if you've not already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. And if you've you got a little wind noise there. If you've not,
Yeah, sorry about that.
that's better now. So if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to my channel, because you'll get the updates. Hopefully, you get the updates to these and more videos I'll be doing. I'll be doing more videos on EMP, threats to our national security inside and outside of our country, to your security, to your home, your farm, and I'll also show you more about how to grow your own food, which is one of the most important things to do now. The various different threats to our country, be the climate, whatever else, and I'll show you how to eat from the wild. And I'll show you, I got plenty of videos on raising worms, growing food in your house, outside, and I'll be doing more aquaponics videos in the near future too. So also to support my channel, click the links below. Right now we have a special on 4 weeks of long-term storage food that lasts up to 25 years from My Patriot Supply. To get that, go to prepwithgreg.com, prepwithgreg.com, link below. And when you get on that site, prepwithgreg.com, if you click on where it says My Patriot Supply, it'll actually take you into the website, and I'll get credit for purchases you make there too. You really need some prepping supplies right now. Food supplies are going to be highly questionable as we move into this grand solar minimum period and other things that are right before us. The globe has got invasions of locusts going on right now. There's flooding in China. The locusts are in South America. They may even come up into the American West, Midwest. So we may have severe food security problems right now. So you need to get your food secure, and you need to grow your own. To grow your own, you need plants, seeds that are heirloom. Heirloom seeds are the kind of seeds you can plant, and when you harvest the plant and harvest the seeds from the plant and replant them, you get the same plant back. You don't get that with hybrid seeds, which are very popular. So a good source for heirloom seeds is True Leaf Market. Also, through the True Leaf Market, you can get supplies and seeds to grow microgreens in your home, which you can grow no matter what the weather is doing outside. And I've got videos showing you just how to do that. And you can grow a lot of food in a very small space. You'd be surprised what you can grow on a rack. So True Leaf Market, link for that below too. So now back into it, Lee. Lee, you have told me that you have intel about
Yes.
devices that China has that apparently have been snuck in the United States that could generate EMPs. Tell us more.
Okay, so this all started actually back when I was an advisor to Congressman McCall. He was the chairman of the Congressional Oversight Committee for the Department of Homeland Security. And at the same time that he was the chairman and I was advising him, we were deploying, because I was part of a system being designed. I actually wrote a entire requirement as well as a technical solution for a border guard network that was an electronic fence between the United States and Mexico. And so we went all the way from San Diego all the way down to Brownsville, Texas. I had maps of every inch of the border, everywhere that they were crossing, everywhere where they had sensors. And so I had set all that up. And at the same time that we were putting all that together, we were in the process of testing different sensor systems along the border to see how applicable they were to be deployed within this application. And so one of the nights that we were out and had these sensors in place, we caught some Chinese nationals coming across the border with these sensors. And when they were apprehended, they had components on them that everyone there thought would be from a nuclear type device, just from what the materials they were made out of and what all assortment of things this individual had with him. When he was apprehended, the feds came and got him immediately and took him away, and we never heard anything else in regards to that. And we had asked around a lot, but never got any more. So that was our first clue that something like this was going on. And we're like, okay, why would he want me to do that? But we didn't know. So then just the other day, I was given some additional information in regards to an actual plan that had been uncovered from within China that had basically the locations that would be struck and how that was going to be part of their doctrine, and that doctrine was going to be applied to basically an electronic Pearl Harbor against the entire United States. And if these said locations, and I'm not going to give the number, but it's a little more than a handful, but it's not a whole bunch, that these locations, if they were indeed attacked, would take the grid down in the United States for a minimum of 18 months, possibly as long as 5 years. I'm of the belief that it would be the 5-year period of time, not 18 months. And so I recommend that people start protecting their homes with equipment that is EMP shielded, so as that you could have your own power, because you can pretty much rest assured when and if this does happen. It's like the general I used to work for. It's not a matter of if someone is going to use a nuclear device against the United States. It's a matter of when. And when that happens, we all individually need to be prepared for that day and be able to survive and thrive, as opposed to being one of the 90% casualties, which is believed is what it would amount to as far as the number of people lost if this event or when this event transpires. Talking a 90% casualty rate.
Well, that's interesting because I had Dr. Peter Pry on my channel about a week or two ago, and he was outlining that China is actively making plans to do such an event. Not saying they actually will instigate it, but they have active plans. And given their current aggressive posture, I would think that there's a higher probability that they would initiate that, especially if they had the thought that we were going to do something. And it appears that, dictators think differently than we do, and they think everybody thinks like them, so they're probably more likely to instigate an event like that than a lot of people here would suppose. That said, the idea that 90% would survive is, and I detail that out to Dr. Pry, I estimate that to be optimistic, because now even on the farms, only about 1 in 8 farmers are really growing their own food and vegetables. They're growing market gardens and market crops, which really won't feed them or their families for the most part. And also the crops they grow require fuel. They require seed that are sequestered and sold to them annually by big companies like Bayer, which were bought Monsanto. And these seeds are GMO seeds that and hybrid seeds that you just can't plant yourself anyway, and they're contract required not to save their seeds. So if everything goes down, there's not going to be a source of seeds. There's not going to be fuel to run the tractors. A lot of these tractors now are vast electronic devices with $10 million tractors that they have to give software upgrades to. They wouldn't even operate those newer tractors that run the really big fields if they had the fuel. But it takes power. It takes electricity. Electricity is the keystone of all the different infrastructures that we have. If you take that one out, you lose all the other critical infrastructures in our country. I think there's something like 13 critical infrastructures. Communication.
38.
Huh?
38 critical infrastructures, and it's a 90% casualty rate. So they're losing 90% of the population.
Yeah, well, I talked with Dr. Pry. He was on the commission that came up with that, and I talked with him quite a bit about what went into that. I really think that it's probably going to be higher, just because it's not as much food. People aren't growing food. They're not doing the things they ought to be doing like they used to. They took for granted the notion that more people were doing that, and they're not. So that's why people need to grow their own food. And that's one of the big things I harp on. You better grow your own food. You need to learn how to forage from the wild. And if you think a big game rifle is going to feed you for a year or two, you're in for a big surprise, because all the big game will be wiped out in a few months. And that big game rifle, if you shoot the smaller stuff alone, leave you a splatter of hair and blood at most. There won't be any meat to eat. I know what that looks like. So all that said, what can you say about these devices? They're nuclear. Did it look like trigger components they found? I'm assuming that
yes, it was trigger components is what it looked like for triggering a nuclear device. And so what it would, and the people I've talked to think that they have developed a specific device that has a better yield with the gamma rays and so on and so forth with the EMP. So it's not so much of a nuclear device, but more of an EMP type device. Additionally, there's also portable EMP devices that can trigger multiple times. So, there's more than one way it could go about doing this. I mean, yes, it could be done with a nuclear type, and the documentation that I'm privy to just says EMP device. It does not specify a nuclear type device, but I would think if you're trying to induce those literally trillions of volts, tera electron volts, onto the conductor, the main transmission lines of the country, if you're trying to induce that onto those you're going to need something a little bit bigger than a portal device. It pretty much looks like it would have to be some type of yielding nuclear device to do that. From the information I've seen, the portable devices that can trigger multiple times, I don't think would have enough energy to take out the grid like this plan calls for.
Well, there was, I believe his name was William Graham. He used to be a NASA administrator. He was a Soviet weapons expert. It's his primary role. Actually, he is a physicist who is the topmost expert on EMP in the West. And he was briefed by Soviet generals after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russian generals they were then, I guess. But they briefed him and told him that Russia had EMP superweapon technology that could yield over 200,000 volts per meter on power lines or any conductive structures on the ground from detonation, in space above America. That, in fact, the fill limit at the edge of the continent would be something like 50,000 volts per meter for a single device. And the rad hard requirement for the military installations is actually 50,000 volts for linear meter. Like I said, square meter by accident. So what that means is that all the rad hard facilities are susceptible to this weapons technology. And by the way, they admitted they shared this technology with North Korea, and China has it too. China developed it independently, apparently. And what they're doing is they're actually making smaller nukes that are optimized for generating gamma rays.
Right.
So
exactly,
that's what they are. They're gamma ray generators, and about a 300 kiloton device is actually optimum, and that's what North Korea was testing. And a lot of people may not appreciate that, but that is. I've got something ringing here. I thought I had everything turned off. In any event, I had all that turned off. Okay, so that is a very sobering prospect for a device, and if given it's a smaller device, something like that, that's still maybe a little bit larger than, say, a backpack nuclear device. The United States came up with something called a B-54, which was a backpack nuclear device. As you know, we also had what we call the Davy Crockett that we shot out of artillery shell. I believe it was about 15 kilotons or something. I don't remember exact yield of it.
From a Tom Kenny.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So
they named her that because she was such a bitch to drive. I actually know one of the guys that actually drove one of them, and he told me that. He said the reason that they called her that was because she was such a bitch to drive. It had trucks on both ends. So you've got two different drivers trying to drive a truck that has a trailer between the two of them, and one guy is giving it gas, the other guy's hitting the brakes, and one's going wider around the corner, so he's got to go faster. It was just an absolute cluster. And he said the war would be over by the time they got the thing in place, because you couldn't make any speed with it. It was just an absolutely insane vehicle.
They didn't have good control functions back then with electronics. Here's what interests me now. In 1997, former Soviet General Alexander I. Lebed gave an interview to 60 Minutes in which he contended that the Soviet Union created around 250 suitcase size, they claimed, portable nuclear weapons similar to the United States B-54. And
and that's like an RS-71 or something is what the model number of that is.
I don't know that right off, but what he claimed was that 100 of them was missing. 100.
He's correct in that.
He claimed, that Soviet general claimed 100 were missing. Now you can't tell me that somebody don't know where those devices are.
Yeah, you can.
Soviet Union doesn't know anymore. They lost control of them. Somehow they slipped through, got sold to the highest bidder, or what? Now, for people to understand, these are devices that could take out a dam if you get them close enough, maybe a nuclear power plant, but you'd have to get them up to the containment building, which might be hard to do now. But you could take out bridges, all kinds of critical infrastructure.
Right, and you could actually bring it up next to you wouldn't necessarily have to take out the nuclear power plant. You could go to the transmission station and take that out, and the induced current would go back into the nuclear facility and take it back out.
Well, the fact that a lot of people don't understand is the nuclear power plants have to take their power off the grid due to load balance, and they don't actually generate their own power. And when they lose power, all they have is backup generators. And when they run out of fuel, you don't have anything to keep the cooling water running. You got a problem. Inside the reactor,
I've got a solution for that, by the way, but I won't go into it on here. But we can.
Well, you know, they can treat the
resolve
reactor
that
itself by dumping tons of boron in there.
borax. Yeah.
But they can fill the reactor with that. Of course, the reactor is shot from that point forward, but that's really what they ought to do in a case like that. The cooling pools, though, are not inside the containment building. They're not set up to have that done to them. And even if they did, they would still be hot. They require about 60 gallons a minute water pumped on top of them. And when that water flow stops, they're typically on a 20 foot of water, but at 60 gallons a minute, that will evaporate off at some point in time. And there's a zircaloy alloy, which is a zirconium alloy, that coats the fuel rods, burns on contact with air. And I have test reports from Sandia, which they actually done. I had somebody tell me, oh, they won't do that. Oh, no, they will do that. I've got the test reports that shows quite plainly that they burn. Even the ones that haven't been in reactors burn. And that was kind of surprising because most people thought it was mainly the enrichment that they got inside the reactors of hydrogen and things like that. But those things burn on contact with air. And it's kind of funny because when they're hot, of course they are hot. It's kind of, pretty much an alloy of the same stuff a lot of women have on their fingers thinking it's a nice little diamond. But in any of it, of course, that's not of any danger of burning, but that's kind of interesting. So there's something like probably by now about 80 metric tons of spent fuel rod waste in these nuclear power plant cooling pools. And that's like 300 times more radioactive material than all the warheads on Earth just waiting for the lights to go out, go up in smoke. Not a pretty picture. That's something we got to look at. How do we contain and fix that? What's our short-term plans? And that's not been adequately addressed right now. But to get back to this, so 100 devices missing. Now, maybe, we do know that over time, the thing that burns out on a nuclear device is the trigger. So maybe they already had those and had acquired them without having to sneak that stuff across the border. Of course, you probably sneak a Mack truck across the border, or could have back in the day. That's why we need
still
border.
Can in some places.
Huh?
You still can in some places.
This is
There's
why
places
we
along
need border security. A lot of people
Right.
don't understand it.
There are places along the border that you can drive back and forth, both on the southern border and the northern border. And you can crisscross back and forth the border as much as you want and not have to worry about it. Years ago, I actually met a man who lives in El Paso, Texas. He worked for a trailer manufacturing company that had a contract with the federal government. And he had told me that he had been working in the United States for 7 years. And he comes back and forth from Mexico every day and doesn't go through the checkpoint. He sneaks across the border every day and had every day, with the exception of one. He had only missed one day of work in 7 years. And that day there was some border patrol at his crossing point and he couldn't get across. So he missed that day of work. But other than that, he's been coming into the United States illegally every day for 7 years.
You can sneak armored vehicles and tanks across the border itself.
Yeah. Well, there are places along the border that you can take tractor trailers back and forth across the border anytime you so choose. There's no fence. There's no anything. There are places that you can't even tell there's a border, and you can drive back and forth, especially the farther west that you go, the more porous it gets until you get out to California. Then it's not
Yeah.
quite as bad.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So that's a scary prospect that they could get this stuff across and then sneak it around. I mean, good Lord, look at all the drugs that get smuggled in this country. How do you think that we could keep this stuff from coming in with all the drugs that get smuggled in? It's just, tons and tons of drugs get smuggled in all the time. You can smuggle anything in this country as long as you can do that. So this whole idea that people have this smug sense of security that nobody can sneak that stuff in is highly misplaced, and a lot of stuff may already be here because those weapons Soviet General Lebed was talking about were already positioned. They were positioned in place here. That's what he told us. And now they couldn't account for 100 of them. And, through the course of the Cold War, there was something on the order of 50 full-size nuclear devices, bombs that got lost just through accidents. And, they rolled off the, plane loaded with one rolled off the deck of a carrier, or a plane crashes, submarine goes down. We've lost, between us and the Soviet Union, over 50. That's the ones we know about. So, have any of those been recovered? But here's another thing I know about, and I don't know if it's true, but I was told from a credible source when the Soviet Union fell that Iran procured 2 fully functional nuclear missiles from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan had them at one time, but then Russia just suddenly pulled them back. But I was told it happened before Russia pulled it back, and that was in fact why Russia pulled them back, was they realized that the security was lax there and there were people there cutting deals. So this whole idea that Iran doesn't have enough material to make a bomb yet could be, they may already have too.
Oh yeah, they do. They do. They already have more than enough to make several. That's already been verified by other parties.
Well,
so yeah, they could produce at any time they wanted to.
They're enriching real fast right now too, since the treaty is done.
Absolutely,
They probably were all along, never were honoring that in the first place. So that whole thing was a sham, in my opinion. So it's kind of an interesting thing that there are a lot of players out there who could take down our grid. So it's in the doctrine of China, Russia, and Iran that if they have a war with us, that's what they do. They take out the grid. Now, you can take it out in many ways. And what the experts like Dr. Peter Vincent Fry and many others believe is that they would do it in a multi-pronged, redundant attack. There would be hacking. There would be direct ballistic attacks where people walk in with like AK-47s. There would be devices like you're talking about employed. And there would be overhead detonations, maybe from a satellite, fractional orbital bombardment, just from a low Earth orbit satellite coming over, like the 2 North Korea have orbiting the United States right now. So there are many ways that these could be initiated. It could be from a missile, maybe coming from the south, like out of the, I had a lady who had a dream, vision. She knew nothing about EMP. She's a lady who works in a dairy in Wisconsin. She's got a prepper channel. She's a farmer, and she was having these visions of the U.S. being attacked, and it didn't make sense to her because she saw like 2 missiles fly over and explode in space, and it just basically took out the United States through all the power. She didn't understand what that meant, and she saw these being launched incidentally from offshore, off the coast of Venezuela. And I thought, wow, that's exactly what I thought would happen if they wanted to launch a sneak attack on us, because who do you blame it on? There's so many people down there in Venezuela operating, Iran, Russia, and China. Which one do you blame it on if that's the case? In doing it offshore, they're outside of, anything going on in Venezuela, so they could definitely sneak in. And by the way, North Korea did have a cargo ship called the Chung Gang running around in the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps in the Caribbean Sea, back in 2013, that had 2 fully erect missile launchers hidden under bags of sugar in a cargo hold. I've covered that in the past. So these are things that people need to pay attention to. That's that they may have been doing a dry run. This happened at roughly about the same time that somebody went in with AK-47s and did a practice dry run on the Metcalf power station in San Jose. And it's said that there's only 9 critical stations that have to be taken down to take down the entire grid in the United States. when the
Right.
head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard was told this, he said, I've already targeted 20.
Yeah. And the thing is that you don't have to have an ICBM to do this. You could use a Hawk missile. We're talking a Vietnam era missile. You could put just a simple Hawk missile or any other small intermediate range missile. Load that onto a cargo vessel, bring it off the coast of the United States, and fire it. And approximately 45 seconds later, you can take out a fifth of the country.
20 years ago, I, on a shoestring budget, was in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. I did this several times, launching balloons that carried rockets to 20 miles in altitude. These rockets were capable of hitting over 50 miles in altitude, 62 miles. Actually, were designed to hit 62 miles in altitude. They could have went as far as Havana from where I launched them if they misfunctioned. So I could have easily got something over the middle of the United States from one of these rockets. The entire package I had hanging below the balloon was 300 pounds. It was more than enough to put a device on like this. We absolutely could. I didn't have a device and I had no interest in this, but the techniques I practiced were absolutely everything a person would need to launch an attack like that. I did it myself 20 years ago, and I did it more than once out in the Gulf of Mexico. No one would see it coming, bam. And that's when I really started questioning a lot of things. I said, wow, what we're doing here in the Gulf of Mexico on the shoestring budget, operating out of garages, it would have taken superpowers to have done just a couple of decades earlier, just in terms of our launch capabilities. When I realized the delivery capability of what we were doing, it really brought me to consider that our world is in peril if we don't learn to get along with each other, because the weapons of mass destruction capabilities will be in everybody's fingertips eventually, if nothing else but through the biological technology proliferation. So
I agree. The threat is real. The threat is there. We all need to prepare. It's not a matter of if, but when.
Well, then we got a lot of getting ready to do. So, and then there's a lot of natural stuff coming at us too. I know you're a student of the Grand Solar Minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you are a very prepared person. You're living on one of the best prepper locations there are. You got a boat that's entirely self-powered, electricity that is generated from the sun, a total solar boat, the electric blue. How big's your yacht there?
So she's 40-foot LOA length overall and a 24-foot beam. And we use batteries and solar power to power the boat exclusively. So there are other boats that are solar powered, but they're designed as a hybrid. They all have generators on board, and the normal standard operating procedure with those vessels includes the use of that generator on a daily basis. We don't operate with a generator at all. We have a generator, I'm actually having on it here right now, that is a emergency generator that's actually not connected to the boat. It actually just sits on the deck. It's never been started. So we're almost 1,800 miles now with no auxiliary power source for moving the boat or operating the boat when we're underway.
And I'm told you might be interested in selling that boat eventually. So maybe people.
Yes.
Contact.
Yeah, we will be interested in doing that. We want to continue to develop more platforms. So this year, we've proven the technology, and this one we haven't finished out everything inside. We're more worried about the technology as opposed to a lot of the creature comforts. So, some of the bedrooms haven't been finished as far as the remodel or the staterooms or whatever you want to call them, and things of that nature. But as far as the functionality of the vessel, it does exactly what it was designed to do, and it does it with half of the solar panels in the original design.
Oh.
We're actually only using this solar array. So I have another solar array that's right back here on the bow of the boat that's never been connected. So all those panels that are out on the boat have no connection into the vessel at all. They're just mounted there. They're not connected in any way, shape, or form. We've traveled the almost 1,800 miles just on the solar array over top of the wheelhouse. So we know that the technology works.
That's impressive. So we'll get into hardening your own stuff here in a minute. Then we'll talk about 5G. What else can you say about these devices and the Chinese and the doctrine of other countries? What else do you know that you can share with the listeners today in terms of the threat?
Well, we know that the threat is real. We know that the efforts have been made. We know that the research of these facilities has been done. We know that the plans have been written out, and we know that the Chinese speak as if this is a plan that has already been prepared, everything put in place, and they can just pull the trigger on it anytime they want. That is the belief amongst some of the intelligence folks that I have spoken with about this.
And Dr. Pry would concur with that, and he's written articles about that. So what you find in your intel agrees with what he has said. For those that don't know, Lee Wheelbarger has been quite involved in a number of the three-letter agencies and has a lot of good intel contacts in Washington, D.C. area and the Pentagon. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, I've got 30 years in supporting the alphabet soup and the DoD. So, I've worked, my previous life was when I worked for the Battle Lab, my job was to identify, locate, test, evaluate any technology that would enhance the warfighting capabilities of the armed forces. So if it's got wires coming out of it and it can be used for the U.S. government or military as an advantage, or can be used as a weapon against the U.S. military, I've evaluated it and looked at it as far as a threat. Working with the government agencies, that was basically the cue of those government agencies making a wide variety of extremely unique toys for specific applications and requirements. And my laboratory required us to, once we got the requirement, to develop a technical solution and have it delivered to the battlefield within 90 days. We also did the same thing for U.S. government intelligence agencies with monitoring things and a variety of other things that really can't get into. So I've had good sources and I've had them for a good long time, and I'm quite confident in the intel that they do provide me with. So I have no belief that anything that they're giving me isn't factual or proven in some way.
I understand that, and I've had some military experience myself in military avionics, and I worked on the Strategic Defense Initiative under what was the Army's Strategic Defense Command at the time. Now they call it SMDC, Strategic Missile and Space Defense. But we had the ARIS project office. I was involved in the exoatmospheric reentry interceptor subsystem. And also, I worked the M1 tank and the 15 test program set development. So I've got the military electronics background, but I wasn't in developing all the stuff you were. Now, my older brother, you might have actually met him. He was quite involved in the leading edge development of all the Army future combat systems. His name was Edmund Allison. He used to work out of
probably met him.
Fort Echuca, and then he worked out of McClellan. But he passed away from COVID-19 a couple of months ago, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he was 67, so that was quite a loss. It was a real shake up for me. He died just 3 weeks after my dad died. But in any event, so that's kind of personal to me. But he was involved in that stuff too. So let's go back to talking defense now of your personal assets. I was also part of my life, I did electrical power and controls for industrial parts washing equipment, and I designed machines sometimes that would draw over 400 amps, and a machine that would draw over 400 amps took a wire cable bigger around than this cap here. Yeah, big old cable, exactly. Huge cable to draw that kind of amperage without catching on fire.
I got them all through this.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. But I'm seeing people talk about devices they're claiming will take care of your home, shield your home. They claim these devices will protect your home from 100,000 amps up to 42 times. And their wires are about the size of my mouse wire here. You got a little bitty box, which is maybe 3 times bigger than my mouse, with some wires like that coming out of it, about 3 wires. And they claim that will protect your home. 42 EMP strikes at 100,000 amps. Well, I am an electrical engineer, and I know about derating current. And, I tell you what I have done. I have seen entire circuits in vehicles burnt instantly from just having a few hundred extra couple hundred volts put on them. I've seen it fry like this. You can't switch it fast enough. Of course, electronic switches are pretty fast. But my training when I was in the military was that for communication systems, we had to completely disconnect at least one radio set, because we were told the arc would jump the gap of a switch. Any switch you put in there, it would jump it because of the dielectric breakdown of the air. And when you see at the power stations, when they throw these big switches, they got these ginormous switches they throw, and that arc, it's like lightning, will follow it for like 20 feet through the air. And that's less current than you would get from an EMP.
Oh, way less, way less.
So how in the heck do they propose that you can protect a home with something chintzy little box with some little potted cheap components in it with wires no bigger than that coming out of it? I am an electrical engineer, and I'm going to tell you what, there is no way on God's green earth you're going to conduct current like that through a wire like that for a nanosecond. I can't see how you can do it. Can you?
No, I can't. But the great part about it is you're going to be talking to Dr. Arthur Bradley, who, in my opinion, is the world authority. Yeah. So if there is anybody in the world to ask, he would be the man that I would call. I had the pleasure of having lunch with him a few months ago.
He probably don't want to talk about it. I understand the certain party.
He actually would. I think he would. Dr. Arthur Bradley, like I said, is what I consider one of the top world authorities on EMP.
Yeah, I know.
I was working on a program for. We're not going to go into that anyway.
I know where he stands on this, and he agrees with it. But he got. Yeah. They tried to sue him. I'm also aware of that. So he shut down and pulled a lot of the stuff off the internet. He had test results and all kind of stuff, and he dug these things out. The few, maybe $2 worth of components in these things. So, but he shut it all down because he ran scared. I tell you what, if they come after me, I'm going to get one of those things and fry it on the video and put it out everywhere and launch a class action suit against them from all the people that bought them. So I think you ought to build my channel, and I'll make a fortune putting them out of business. So if they sue me, I'm going to say, thank you.
Bring it.
Because I am going to fry the darn thing and put them out of business. So
there's places that you can send it to get that test done.
Oh, yeah. Well, they had certain limited range tests done, but it did not cover the entire spectrum of an EMP. It was a very limited test, and they knew they could pass. It was like low fruit on the tree stuff. And they're claiming they're lab certified. They got all these claims out there. Man, I ain't never heard so much. I'm not naming the company's name, but those that are wise ought to pay heed. If you think you can protect your home from something with tiny little wires, like speaker wire, mouse wire, that to cover your home from 100,000 amps, buddy, I'm not seeing it. I mean, because the switches, if you do switch it, it's going to jump the gap. I mean, if you take a big substation and it's throwing a switch through the air for 20 feet and this arc is following with less amps than you're going to see in the EMP, explain that to us. How in heck can you do that? But anyway, I'm just asking questions here. Like Greg said, this is a live action role play. But
Mhm.
let those that have ears hear and eyes see. Uh, but anyway, all right. So now you have taken steps to protect what you have, and you have advice for protecting a home and protecting
Mhm.
your boat. What would you say to people? And I'll ask Arthur Bradley the same kind of questions. What would he do? I know he actually covers that. So what do you do to protect your assets?
Uh, First off, we don't tie to the grid. Secondly, we have extremely short wires on the boat specifically for that. We have wires that are in a loop so as that they can cancel that out in the event that it's done. And then we have protective devices that go in line uh, between the solar panels and all of the other lines to choke that out. So that's what we do to protect ourselves.
Okay,
For a home, I would recommend that if you want to go to a solar system, so far the best whole home system that I found is the Solar system. You can get those out of Texas. That system will allow you to have an EMP near your location and be able to absorb most all of that, so as that it doesn't take the system down. And then it also has
what's the name of that company?
Solark, Solark. That's the best turnkey solution in a single solution that I've seen so far.
How much is a system like that, and how many watts does it generate?
I can't really tell you what the cost of it is. I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that you can put a 11 kW solar array onto it. That's the maximum that it'll handle, and you can protect the 11 kW solar array. And I think it does 7.5 kW or 10 kW or something like that is what its inverter capability is, and it's 220. So yeah, you'd have to ask them on the price. I don't know. I don't sell them. Just we evaluated it, and that's the best one we found thus far.
Okay, well maybe you can send me a link to that. I'd like to check it out, please.
Yeah.
And maybe I can talk to them and might recommend it to my viewers in the future also.
Yeah.
Well, that's very good. So the next topic we wanted to talk about was something that seems to worry a lot of people. People are scared to death of 5G. And I've been trying to tell them, don't worry about it. It's not what you think. People tell me that, oh, don't take the test for COVID-19 because they're planting trackers inside your head that use 5G. If they can plant all they wanted, they wouldn't be able to detect them because 5G can only penetrate 1/64th of your skin. I mean, the outer layer of the skin. People talk about it affecting the blood-brain barrier. No, it does not go that far. 4G might, but not 5G. So 4G is actually more penetrative than 5G. Nobody's worried about 4G. Everybody's walking around with cell phones up to their head, getting tons of 4G, which goes deeper, and they're all scared of 5G.
Right.
I'm telling you, 4G is more to worry about. Tell us what you think there, Lee.
Well, you're absolutely right. And G is just a generation. So you had 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G. Each time you add a G, you're just adding basically another spectrum or another chunk of RF spectrum to it. But the powers continue to come down. So if you didn't die from 1G, 2G, and 3G and 4G, how are you going to die from 5G? Because 5G is even weaker. So, it's for people to think, and the thing that gets me is that all these people go, oh, it'll change your DNA. Well, name somebody that's done to. Name somebody that has had their DNA changed by a cell phone.
It
All
doesn't
of
get
us
in,
holding
it
these
doesn't
cell
go deep
phones.
enough. It doesn't go deep
Right. Well,
enough.
it's not the type of radiation either. To change DNA, you have to have an ionizing radiation, which is up into basically getting into light. Whereas this is just RF. This is electromagnetic. It's not, ionizing radiation. So it's not even the same kind of radiation. So you're not going to have DNA change. You're not going to have tumors and all these other things. It doesn't emit that type of energy.
So let me explain the spectrum to those that don't understand it. we're all used to visible light. We see it all the time. It's all around us. The sun puts out just about anywhere on the planet something on the order of a kilowatt per square meter. Kilowatt per square meter of sunlight just hitting the ground if it's not cloudy that day. And this is what we're used to all the time. A kilowatt, that's 1,000 watts. Now, what you get with the sunlight is light. Light is a visible spectrum. And RF is lower frequency. So as you start going to the lower frequency of light, the high frequency of light is like violet. And then the lower frequency is red. And then you get into the infrared, which is light that we can't see with our eyes. But radio frequencies are even lower frequency than that. Now, microwaves are higher than AM, FM radio that we used to know. But microwaves are very common these days. And we use that kind of frequencies all the time now. And that's what is in 4G. But they're still at low power. They're not what's in your oven. And they only penetrate so much. 4G will get a little deeper within you than 5G will. As the frequency goes up, the penetrative power goes down until you get into ionizing radiation levels, the higher, really higher power stuff, which is on the other side of the violent end. Like ultraviolet light will penetrate your skin a little bit farther, and it will do damage to your cells. And higher up gamma rays and things like that really get you. But you know, X-rays and stuff like that. But when you go back into the RF side, it's not ionizing. Now, if you get heating effects, if you had a dipole coupling where you have a resonant frequency between the radio wave and the atom, then it could jiggle it, maybe break a molecule. Microwaves at the right frequency could potentially, certain frequencies could do that with a water molecule, because a water molecule is a dipole moment. Oxygen molecule is not a dipole. An oxygen molecule is not electrically divergent across the molecule. It's symmetric, so it will not be jiggled. Some people have said that 5G rotates, causes oxygen molecules to rotate, so you can't breathe them, you can't absorb it, and you suffocate. And people are dropping and dying because they can't get oxygen because of 5G. Even if it was rotating, coming in your lungs, by the time you get it into your bronchial sacs, it would have stopped. Just all the kinetic, whatever it takes to get it inside of you. But it's not doing it in the first place. 5G cannot take oxygen molecules and make them spin. It cannot affect your blood-brain barrier. It's not going to be accessing chips and devices that are buried inside of your body, because it does not have the penetrative power. Now I hear people, oh, but 5G is used for a weapon. It's weaponized. Well, the weapons are high power transmitters that are mounted on vehicles that, again, only affect the surface level of the skin. They just sting, they burn. They're crowd dispersal weapons. They don't do permanent damage either. They'll make you sting and ouch and make you want to get the heck out of there. That's what they're for. But they're not going to kill you.
That's a kilowatt transmitter, and it transmits at 90 gigahertz. I've actually been fired at by that. So that was part of crowd control, less than lethal. When I was at Fort Benning, we were part of the less than lethal program. So our job was to test and identify technologies that soldiers could use to do security details that were less than lethal. So we got to be nominated as guinea pigs. So we've been tasered, shot with bean bags, shot with puke pellets, had our legs and arms glued together with spray foam, fried by that device. So we've had all of those wonderful experiences in dealing with all of that. And there's no way that 5G can hurt you. And the other thing is, they say, oh, it's at 60 gigahertz. Well, anybody that says that 5G operates at 50 or 60 gigahertz has no idea what they're talking about, because the highest frequency that 5G transmits on is 34 gigahertz, not 50 or 60. So that's a quick and easy way to find somebody that has no clue as to what they're talking about, because they don't even know the frequency range that it operates in.
Lee, what would it matter?
Well, it wouldn't matter, other than the fact that that's just an easy way to find that somebody has absolutely no idea what they're talking about. They're saying, hey, watch channel 12 news, and there is no channel 12. You know, the TV only goes to channel 6. So, they have, again, that's just an easy way for people when they say that, the power is so powerful, it'll burn you. Well, how come we don't have tumors all over our hands?
Bingo.
Because
Well, you hear
everybody's out
this
here
all the
doing
time.
this all the time.
And I'm really saddened that I often hear medical
One.
doctors coming on the YouTube channels and talking about it.
Right.
Medical doctors are not RF system experts. They don't know radio.
That's right.
I do. You do.
That's right.
We are
Right.
we are engineers. We understand communications technology. We understand the
Mhm.
RF spectrum, for Pete's sake. An engineer is an applied scientist, for those that don't understand that. We take science and we make real stuff out of it. That's what an engineer does. We take the
Yeah.
theories and turn them into stuff you use every day. But we have to understand those theories. We have to understand how to apply it. And we're always looking for new ways to advance that and apply it. So the key thing there is, and I know a lot of people get mad over this, but it's just gonna be mad. Oh, that ain't true. Blah, 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 blah. I hear that. And no matter what you say, they're going to just steam and jump up and down. But the fact of the matter is, it only transmits. Look, the reason you have to have so many transmitters is because the leaf stops it. But because you have so many transmitters and it carries so much information in the higher frequency, you can carry more information, then you can get by with using lower power, which you need to do if you're going to use a lot of different transmitters. So that means that my understanding is the very top threshold of power in any 5G transmitter is 200 watts, which is like a really strong light bulb. And most of them are—
No, 200 milliwatts, not 200 watts.
Huh?
200 milliwatts, not 200 watts.
Yeah, they're tiny. Now, yeah, it was like when I was in the National Guard after I got out of the Army, I was operating a radio communications van called the ANTRC 138, for those that are familiar with that technology. And we had each one had 3 microwave radios in it. And we used to have to hook up waveguide and run a big antenna up in the ground to transmit long distance. Oh yeah, waveguide. A lot of people see waveguide going into these cell phone towers, and I've seen on videos where we go, look, they got a big conductor in there, so big this thing can carry so many megawatts of energy. These things are going to fry the country. Those things are hollow, and they're not conductors. They're waveguide for transmitting the radios that's on the ground. And by gosh, if you were putting that much power out through the transmitter, you'd have to have ginormous power plant, cables coming into the facilities themselves. It's so utterly ridiculous that can't be done. Those are waveguide. They're not conductors. I know what waveguide is. I've used them. But what I was going to say is, we used to pull up just in the armory, just for quick check out of the radio systems, rather than put all this stuff up. We'd pull 2 vans up side by side and just take the ports off, and we could talk back and forth. I had a sergeant tell us, so you boys need to watch out. Don't be getting between them vans and them ports opened up. So you could roast a chicken in there. You're putting out 250 milliwatts. And I kind of looked at him and said, oh, you mean a quarter of a watt?
Exactly.
Oh, he got mad.
Quarter of a watt.
Yeah, I don't think
you can barely detect this, though. It's 1,300. You were talking about the energy coming from the sun. It's 1,360 watts per square meter. So that's a substantial amount of energy that we're getting hit. A lot of that is ionizing radiation, as opposed to 5G being non-ionizing radiation.
Well,
So,
the
there's a lot of people.
The UV component is, but so the funny thing is that people don't understand inverse square law. Every point source emitter radiates out in all directions, and the field strength drops off very rapidly as you go away. So if you are 1 foot away, and let's say that it's like 100 watts, then let's say it's 400 watts. It 1 foot away, for just purpose of talking. Then if you get 2 feet away, you're actually dividing by 4 because it's 1 over 2 squared. So it drops to 100 watts. And then if you're 3 foot away, it's a ninth of what it was here. And it drops really fast, because when you start squaring numbers, that number gets big really, really quick, which means that when you're dividing by it, the total number gets exceedingly small very fast. So even when you're 20 foot away, it's nothing, especially compared to sunlight. And sunlight is going to be far more dangerous to you than anything coming out of an RF system.
Yep.
Now, what 5G can be used for is tracking and control.
Mhm.
So they can track you. They can control you a lot more
They can
fidelity.
also do that with 4G.
Yeah, they do that with 4G.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
You're already being tracked, but they can just track you with more fidelity. They can pinpoint your location a lot faster, a lot easier,
Mhm.
to a smaller and smaller area, because they'll have so many more transmitters. It's called triangulation. It's easily done, and they have
Right.
algorithms for it. So yeah, and they're already tracking people. So people don't realize they've already gave up their autonomy, their privacy, by agreeing to all these things they do on social media and use of their cell phone devices. But, and that's maybe something people want to think about as we get closer and closer to be sucked into the hive. Like I said earlier, the proposition of my channel is if you survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. And we're desperately, quickly falling into the hive. So, but again, getting out of the hive is kind of like what you need to do to protect your home from EMP. Disconnect it. Get off grid. Go off grid. That's the best thing you can do is go off grid, because especially even a solar CME, which has the longer waveform radiation, or that would be picked up by the long conductors, that's how it's going to get you. Nuclear EMP can be picked up by shorter conductors, but what Lee's talking about, he's coiling his devices in such a way that the waves on them cancel each other out. The crosstalk, essentially, it's something in frequency science known as destructive interference. If you put it correctly, destructive interference will cancel signals. So there's things you can do along those lines. So Lee is on. You can use, you can use various input things like chokes, Ferris beads. You can have to cut down current surges. You can surge blockers, fuses, and series, things like that. Especially on the big transformers, you need that stuff on the center tap ground leg coming out of those super large transformers. People don't understand those transformers. They what's most vulnerable in our system is the high voltage, very high voltage, long distance transformer stations and substations that carry those. Those things weigh 200 to 400 tons a piece. It takes you 18 months to get them on the deck. You see on the shipping deck received after you order it. But that says that you've got a system that can order it. That says you've got, right now it's all done by the internet. You look it up, you order it by the internet. All the whole transportation is coordinated via internet. All that'll be gone. The money that you would use to buy it is digital ones and zeros in the bank. That'll be gone. So the question is, how do you requisition this stuff? And so while the country is going into mayhem, and our supply chain is shattering all to pieces, and you're losing a good chunk of your population, I don't see how you're ever going to help you Dumpty back together again. I think that we fall this time, we don't come back.
I would agree with that, because the estimate of 18 months is that the infrastructure comes back on so that they can produce it. And
you
that's
still have
not
the
gonna
infrastructure.
happen.
Destroy the infrastructure.
Right. There's
you still
no
have the infrastructure. Don't make sense.
Right.
So,
So you're talking 5 years at a minimum, if then.
yeah, well, they were claiming 5 to 10, but that also required that you were able to have an infrastructure. Now, there are some efforts to be able to have some surviving system, or there were efforts to be able to have a nucleus of power microgrids at military stations that might be able to restart part of the grid. That was being led by General Quast, but General Quast was taken out of his position, and I understand that is not going anywhere right now. So I will have.
You're absolutely correct on that. There is no progress. There are certain facilities that have received some upgrades, but it's not to the level of where it needs to be. And that funding is also not there. So there is a lot that needs to be done that it hasn't even been planned out yet. So it doesn't matter if the money was available tomorrow. They still don't have a comprehensive plan of how it would be implemented, and won't for some time. And in my experience with it, I don't foresee it going anywhere at any time soon, because a lot of this is going to have to be funded by the power companies themselves, and their stockholders don't want to spend the money on something that they think will never be used. So it's really, really hard to make this happen when you've got people who ask for it and have no way to enforce it, and then you have people who have to pay for it who don't want to.
Well, I hope we can get this added as some kind of a rider or provision within one of the transportation or infrastructure bills that tend to go through from time to time. I've got the local state representatives say, hey, if you can get the federal government to put this in one of those bills, that he would write the legislation at the state level to get it provided for. So there are things that could be done. It's not all come together. There are laws in place to make this happen, but the deep state is fighting it at every foot of the way. So that's what we've been working on. I'm quite involved in a coalition called Secure the Grid that has meetings weekly, that's got people from all over the United States in attendance. I'm one of the people in that organization. Basically, you have to go through some security screening before you can be an involved in an organization like that, because there's a lot of sensitive information that's put out. But so I'm actively involved in these things. But I think really what we need to do is figure out ways to, in the meantime, make sure that the nuclear power plants are able to maintain fuel or something to keep the generators running for at least 10 or 15 years to keep the water, or some way to keep the water on those spent fuel rod pools. It might be that we pull in fire trucks. It might be that you still got to fuel them. Maybe we can get fuel barges to those locations to be a secure. But somebody, you'll have to have troops to maintain security for them, because it's going to be a Mad Max world. Everybody's going to be trying to steal the fuel. If you have trucks rolling to bring fuel to them, they're going to have a military escort. The trucks will only roll as long as spare parts are available to keep them rolling, because the whole supply chain will collapse. So it takes planning.
Well, what truck is going to start?
Well, not many. If you had all the components in a Faraday cage for electronics as backup, and then you could restart some trucks. It's only a matter, as long as your spare parts last, that you could run them if you could get fuel. But even the fuel pumps at the gas stations or truck stops are not going to be operating.
Right.
So the whole supply chain is going to be unraveling. And what few trucks can roll will need military escort. Well, the people providing military escort aren't going to want to be doing that when they're worried about somebody kicking down the front door at home and taking mom and kids. So you've got to plan for security for them, for their families. What this requires and what people need to do is contact their state EMA director and say, hey, look, here's the problem you face, and this is going to be a multi-year problem. There's no cavalry coming to save the day. You're going to have to figure it out for yourself, what you're going to do, how you're going to protect these people, and you need to get with your National Guard, the top generals in your National Guard units, and work out how you're going to cover this. You're just going to have to do that, and the governor's office will have to be involved, because a lot of this will be done at the state level. You've got to get maybe the sheriffs, the state troopers, the National Guard, all involved in these things. How do you provide security? How do you do communications? That's something that states are going to have to work on. The best work is being done in the Carolinas. Duke Power, thanks to my friend Ambassador Cooper, Hank Cooper, has been pushing this, and he started pushing it by talking to his MA people and says, look, guys, you need to have a realistic exercise on what you're going to do and how you're going to prepare for it. Should you have a protracted grid down, it will last for over a year, and you don't have the cavalry coming from out of state to help you. Well, they did that, and then the rank and file started to say, hey, this don't work. So they started talking it up inside the companies, and it caused one power company in this country to wake up. And what we need to do is cause this to happen across the country. And by working through your local authorities, through your local agencies, that may be the best way to do it, because the best example of this taking place right now is happening in the Carolinas with Duke Power, thanks to Hank Cooper. And I'll probably have him on my channel too soon. He's been to 2 of my power grid defense conferences, so he's been very supportive. He was also at one time the director of the Strategic Defense Initiative. So I actually worked under him at one time in that regard.
And so, Louisiana is also pursuing that now also.
Right, and I've got
Duke Energy and Louisiana.
Right, right. And I've got friends down there who are involved in that. They've done that through InfraGuard, which is an auxiliary, a citizens auxiliary to the FBI, which I'm actually a member of that myself. So InfraGard is the main organization down there that's pushing that, and I know the guys that are doing that from there. And they've also came to my Power Grid Defense Conference, and I've had one of them speak in the past. So, in fact, the guy who's running the Security Grid Coalition teleconferences is also a Marine from Louisiana. So we've got people working this, but we've got a long way to go, and public pressure would help. So I think we need a couple things. We need people that are willing to call congressmen, to call these EMA directors, and take the steps to kind of push things along. And we may need just to form groups. People do nothing but figure out how to either they generate biofuel, biodiesel locally near these power plants, or I don't know, have a bucket brigade if need be, something to keep the water on these things, because if we don't, we're in trouble. And so for anybody wanting to join something like that, just email me, Greg, at, I'll put the link below this. This is going to be a different email link. I want to tell you for Greg at powergriddefense.org. And email me only to that address if you're willing to participate in an organization to make sure that we can keep these reactors cool and get the states involved in getting the power grid hardened and get our local people protected. So that's the whole purpose of that.
I have a technical solution for that. So if they want it, I would be happy to provide the documentation for that, including the shelter protection and all 9 yards to do that off of solar. So I have a technical turnkey solution that would be able to do that, provide that power to those facilities off solar exclusively.
Okay, now is that something you want to talk about now or offline, or how would you want to do that?
We would do that offline because of the nature of who it was designed for and what it does. But we have the capability to meet that power requirement with an EMP hardened solar solution today. That technology already exists.
We need to get it in place. That's the key thing. We need the means.
Right. I was working on that prior to COVID hitting.
Right, very good, very good. So there's a lot of channels here on YouTube where people just talk. Flattery comes, the sky's falling, running for your lives. But I try to be different on this channel. I try to come up with solutions. And I've in the past posted links for people to take action on things. Of course, I do tell you to take care of yourself. You've got to prepare yourself, and you need to grow your own food. And I've got videos where I show you how to do that. Not the only channel that shows you how, but I definitely have these videos on my channel. And my videos don't show you going out and buying fertilizer and Miracle Grow. I'm using stuff from compost and worm castings and things that I grow and develop on my own farm totally organically with no outside chemical inputs. These are things anyone can do. So I highly encourage everyone to learn the old ways of growing and gardening. That's why my videos might seem boring because I show a lot of bed prep in front, but that's what you got to do. You really got to prep your beds. That's crucial in order to grow the way you need to grow. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the Chinese technology that seems to be in place. Their plans. Lee, what do you think is I have covered Thucydides trout, which makes it sound like there's at least a 75% chance of conflict between the United States and China. But the 25% of the cases, the 4 out of 16 in the last 500 years we had an ascending power meeting an entrenched power that did not result in war were far different than what we're seeing between us and China. They were quite often already countries that were under a single umbrella, like the European Union or underneath the Catholic Church or the United States coming in to help Great Britain as it was replacing Great Britain in World War II. So there were extenuating circumstances usually in the 4 of the 16 cases where it did not occur, except for the U.S. and Soviet Union. There was also an extenuating case. So What do you think of the prospects in your analysis that we would have a conflict with China?
I think it's highly likely, or inevitable. And the reason I say that is when you look back at the history of grand solar minimums, there has always been significant conflict during grand solar minimums, and there has always been major regime changes during grand solar minimums. So grand solar minimums have the tendency to make countries suffer significantly, and they resort to drastic measures to try to resolve those issues. And so we already see countries posturing themselves for the incoming grand solar minimum. We see the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. We
Right.
see the Russians building nuclear generation facilities on barges. We see the Russians now growing their own food in greenhouses in Siberia. We see the Russians building giant icebreakers, large numbers of them. We see the Russian military moving more towards Arctic weapon systems that they didn't have previously in their May Day parade and didn't have previously in their inventory at all. We see more Russian exercises taking place in Siberia and Arctic conditions, significant exercises to get their personnel trained up. We see them seizing property in Ukraine, which was the breadbasket or is the breadbasket of Europe. That's why they captured or overtook the eastern half or eastern quarter of Ukraine all the way over to Donetsk from and Donbass, west of Rostov, Russia. So they won all of that. They want the additional seaport. It was a mistake for Putin to take and try to support Crimea, but he had no choice if he wanted to remain influential as a superpower in the world. The Soviet Russia knows.
Crimea is his only warm water port, on the
right.
hemisphere. I mean, he's, the only other port he's got that gives him access to the Pacific is Vladivostok, which China's just suddenly decided to lay claim on. So we may have an opportunity here to make a treaty with Russia, because Russia's long-term biggest fear is that China would want to take Siberia and a lot of their land. And suddenly China's already making rackets, and they're allied with China against us. Maybe we could flip them on our side, and China would have to really start thinking twice before they get too adventurous. I think it was, I just did a video on that. And my thumbnail picture was me inside the Red Square where they have those May Day parades with the missiles up in there.
Yeah, and I don't think Russia is the threat to the United States that a lot of people want to make it out to be. The Russian Federation. It's not like it used to be.
And I agree with that. And I think that we could make peace with them. I think that would probably relieve the heck out of Putin, because I think ultimately he's more scared of China. But we have, through our sanctions and posturing, drove him into their arms, and he knows that's not a good place to be. So I think that if we could build a new alliance, I'm not saying Putin's great. I'm not saying Putin's wonderful. He's not by any stretch of the imagination. But strategically, it would give us a huge advantage to have him on our, at least on our side in an alliance against China. Now, I have been to Moscow. There's a lot of great people there. I enjoyed going to Moscow. I really like that place. And I'm sure if I could go to China and not get arrested for all the videos I've already posted, I would enjoy that as much, because I dated Chinese women, by the way, from mainland China and from Taiwan and Indonesia, also ethnic Chinese women. And they're great people, and Chinese guys. I know a lot of Chinese guys are really smart, good people. There's good-hearted and smart people anywhere in the world. I'm never talking about any people anywhere. We're talking about the governments that run them. It's the governments that are the problem that's stirring up all the trouble, because it's how they get their power. And the people on the top of these governments typically are sociopaths and psychopaths, and not to be trusted. But in this case, I still would much prefer some kind of alliance with Russia, given where the world's heading right now. I think that would be a huge strategic change in the balance of things. It might just save humanity from a WW3. What do you think?
Yeah, the more alliances and allegiances to each other and treaties and so on and so forth that we have, the safer we are. You know, there has to, you know, I believe in the philosophy of walk softly but carry a big stick.
Amen.
And so, you know, as long as we do that, I think we'll be in good shape. It's when we are weak that our adversaries take advantage. They will literally kick you when you're down.
Oh, absolutely. And
so we just have to make sure we don't get into that position and be aptly protected both against these nuclear and EMP devices, as well against other things like the pandemic that we just went through, which is a product of our red friends.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think China would do if our grid went down? Do you think they would try to invade this country to stop our nuclear power plants from cooking off, or do you think that they think they?
No, I think they would. They would just let us die off in that first 90 days, and then at that point in time, they would be able to just come in and walk right over us. So, you know, it's I had the same discussion with the colonel here, I guess probably about 6 months to a year ago, probably closer to a year ago. And he's like, oh, we'll respond. You know, we've got this and we've got that. And
it'll all be fried.
No, you're not, Colonel. I said, you're not going to do anything but sit here and twiddle your thumbs.
Bingo.
He's like, excuse me, we've trained. And I was like, sir, I don't care if you've trained. Your truck is not going to start.
Bingo.
That nice little impact gas card you got ain't going to work.
Right.
You're not going to be able to go down the street to the Exxon gas station and use your impact card to fill up that nice little truck to drive to that support area that your, you know, team needs to operate in. How are you going to get there? You don't have deuce and a half. You've got new Fords. How many new Fords are EMP protected? 0.
Yep.
So, you know, you're not going anywhere. You're not going to support anybody. Your trucks aren't EMP hardened. The equipment that you use to test the stuff is fried. So your truck is fried, your electronics is fried, your two-way radios are fried, your credit card doesn't work, the gas stations don't have gas, they don't have power to pump the gas. You've got no way to get from here to there, and even if you did get from here to there, you've got no sensors to use, no way to communicate, no way to generate power. What are you going to do for anybody other than sit here and twiddle your thumbs? And he just sat there with, you know, total disbelief look on his face when the light came on inside his head, and he realized that was absolutely correct. In that event, we depend entirely too much, as far as the military and the government, we depend entirely too much on COTS, commercial off-the-shelf technology, and it's not hardened as it should be, nor is it protected as it should be, nor do we have a good plan to enact when it does impact the air handling device. So
most military stations are not hardened for the EMP hardening spec, and even EMP hardening spec falls 4 times too short against the super weapon. So the weapon systems will be fried. Our weapon systems require electronics. They're mostly GPS guided. We're going to lose a lot of the GPS constellation, and the ground facilities that run it and run the computations will be gone. So most of our weapon systems won't even function. You know, M16 will function, but
well, that's the thing that I was trying to make mention of the other day. There were some people on a show that said, oh, well, you know, they can just turn off the satellites and they'll be okay. No, you don't just turn off a satellite and protect it from an EMP. It doesn't work that way.
The satellite
doesn't.
But not from a nuclear event.
Excuse me?
It will work for a solar event, but not a nuclear.
Right. Yeah, a nuclear event, it doesn't care if it's turned on or turned off. That won't matter at all. So you can just rest assured that if there is an EMP event in our ionosphere, that most everything on that side of the planet will be gone as far as the satellite is concerned, and that there will be a resonance of the ionosphere for some time to come after that, as the shock wave goes back and forth around the planet like ripples on a pond bouncing off of the banks. So it'll be resonating. In fact, if you look at the data from the Starfish Prime detonation out over the Pacific, we had significant issues, lost satellites, lost ground communications, lost part of the grid. And we're talking, distances of almost 800 miles away. They were having issues on the ground. So, and that was back then. That's weak stuff compared to what we're going off with now. We're talking about, back then was firecrackers, where now we've got sticks of dynamite. Totally different animals. So it's going to be much, much worse. Yeah.
Redstone rocket, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and they launched several of them on Redstone rockets. In fact, they did a series of those tests. And of course, there was the Tsar Bomba test the Soviet Union did, and that really shocked them. It was,
right.
It had effects for just way beyond anything they could have imagined. And that was a half-scale Tsar Bomba. But a lot of people don't realize the Russians have full-scale 100 megaton Tsar Bomba torpedoes that can travel 6,000 miles. And they could be launched from a submarine or sitting on the bottom of the sea just waiting to be activated. And they would create a tsunami maybe 1,000 foot high. Take out an entire, two of these could take out all the, well, three, if you go to the Gulf Coast, Atlantic, Pacific Coast, you take out the entire coast for miles inland with these things, miles and miles and miles. They would destroy all our major cities. I mean, it'd go up Mississippi River and take out, all the way up in Memphis and St. Louis. So, almost all the major cities would be gone just from a wave and leaving no radioactivity behind. I mean, that may be one way they'd try to clean up the nuclear power plants that are cooking off, is just wash them out to sea. So there's a lot of things to be considered here, and that's one reason we really need to make a treaty with Russia if we can, because they got the nastiest weapon systems that we don't want to have to face. China's got plenty of themselves, but we surely don't want to face the Russian systems. So we've covered an enormous amount of ground here. The likelihood you were talking about with China, the Grand Solar Minimum, it's already happening. They're having major floods. Over 70% of the crop growing area now. Major crop damage is occurring right as we speak. They're on the verge of having a huge invasion of locusts to polish off whatever's left through large sections of the country. In the areas up north that are not being currently flooded are being plagued with early season frost. So the growing capacity of China is highly in question right now. They're also looking at another swine flu epidemic. So their pork production capacity is going down. Our crop capacity here is also in question in these kind of weather times. We may be seeing locusts coming up out of South America. There's a lot of pressure on the world today. No dynasty in China ever survived the Grand Solar Minimum.
Correct.
China knows that, and that's what they're trying to plan for. That's what their Belt and Road initiatives for. That's why they've been making inroads into Africa, into the Sahara specifically, the areas where they think they'll be able to grow things. So they've been very aggressive with that. But I think that they're going to reach a wag the dog point, that the people are going to have great unrest, and in order to distract their attention away from what's happening directly on them, they would manufacture an external war just to save the regime. The heck with how many people it takes out. The regimes only care about their own self-perpetuation. What do you think about that statement?
I believe that they are only worried about their own regime, and the Chinese planning is way different than the planning of other countries. In the United States and in European countries, they plan for between now and the next election and how they will fare during the next election. In China, they plan 50 to 100 years in advance as how they can have dominance of the world. And so that's China's plan, is to dominate the world, and they're going to go about that in any way they can, and they're building a road initiative.
Yeah, they've actually published that. So
yeah,
people are doubting it, not believing it. They've actually told us that in so many ways.
Yep.
And they've been not only they're doing a 9-dash line, but they've been cutting deals with Pacific Islands throughout the Pacific. So they're positioning all the chess pieces on the board, and we're not even playing checkers, and they're playing 3-dimensional chess. So we need to wake up. We need to wake up fast. We're doing it somewhat, but a lot of people still aren't buying it. So I hope America wakes up. Hope we make a treaty with Russia, and people can write their congressmen, and they can write the senators. They can write the president. I will put phone. You can call them. I'll put phone links at the bottom of this email that people can use for the switchboard stations for those. You can go online, look up their email addresses. It's all there. And you can also say, hey, push them to get the grid hardened. Talk to your state EMA directors. Talk to your public service commissioners. These are all things that you can do to get our grid hardened, to make sure the infrastructure is getting in place where states can cover themselves. And Lee, you and I'll have a conversation at some point about your technology. Maybe we can get this introduced. So we are active. We're trying to get this country on the feet where it has at least some chance of survival. And if not, I push this idea of survival communities, that at least we'll have communities that can pull through this, so we can stand up and shake the dust off on the other side and survive. So, and for that, I use the address how5space@aol.com if you want to join one of the tribes. Put tribe in the subject line. And so I'm actively involved in trying to do the things that it's going to take to get us through. You know, my channel is more than just talk. I try to show people, I try to walk the walk, and then lead people through what we need to do to get us on the other side. Lee, I know you're all about that. You're living it. You're on board a boat that's all about it right now. You're at the tip of the spear there. And I appreciate what you've done, the example that you're giving for people there. And I really thank you for coming on my channel, Lee. We've covered so much ground. Is there any final words you would like to say about any of these things we discussed?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering it. For people on your channel that aren't aware, I have several channels on YouTube. One is Inventor Lee Wheelbarger, and the other is KLW World News. On Inventor Lee Wheelbarger, we talk about different technologies and places I go and things I see, and discussions that I have with people like you. I'll share those videos on Inventor Lee Wheelbarger, and then things that are breaking news, like this EMP threat that we have been talking about, or like the information that I gave out the other day in regards to the domestic terrorist threats with the use of fireworks and so on and so forth in the United States against Trump supporters and against law enforcement, of which did come to fruition. So I cover those type things on KLW World News, breaking news, things that endanger people's lives. So those are my two channels. So I encourage anyone who wants to know more about those things, come
I'll have links.
Subscribe to our channel as well.
Yeah, we'll have links to those channels below too, so you can join Lee's channels and subscribe to them. Please do support him. Lee's at the tip of the spear. He's really leading by example what to do and how to do it. He's got the knowledge, the background. I appreciate everything he's doing. Let me ask you one final question. Do you have any idea when we might expect hostilities with China, when you might expect them to attack us? What's your thought on that?
I don't have a specific timeline in mind of when China would do something like that. I think that China would pull the trigger on that when, one, either there were aggressions or hostilities back and forth between the U.S. and China. I think that they would hold that as their ace in the hole, or I think that they would deploy that once we're well into the GSM and they know that they're not going to be able to feed their own peoples. And at that point, they would implement something like that to basically eradicate the human population by the vast majority of the human population in the United States. And then they could just walk in and take whatever they wanted because we would have no way to defend ourselves against that. So once you cut the lights out, the game is over. It's like
Yep.
shutting down the lights in the bar. Go home because there's
I
nothing
think
else
they're
you can
already,
do here.
I think in China, they're already getting severe food critical.
Oh, absolutely. They already are experiencing that, but
Yeah,
we're not
but
far enough in. We're not far enough into the GSM yet. I
no,
think
with all
we've
the
got a few
floods
more
we're
years.
experiencing right now,
Right.
this may happen this year, just from that standpoint.
Yeah, and the threat of them losing the Three Gorges Dam. Imagine what that's going to do to their economy if that fails.
Well, I was in a video with, I did a video on that. And I also had a subsequent video with David DuByne. David's been to China. He's got a lot of contacts in there. And I respect his opinion. And he's right. It's going to take a lot of extra water to fill it up to the point of flowing over the dam. However, I would submit that if the construction stands were really that bad, it may fail without it going over the dam. And it appears that there may already be severe structural deformation of the dam. If they didn't properly anchor it in the bedrock below, as allegations are made, and if they didn't properly anchor the different blocks and segments it's made out of to each other, you could get what the claimed observations are of it being deformed right now. Bending and
Right. There are people who claim it is deformed right now. I haven't been able to independently verify that, but I've looked at some of the photos and it surely does look like it is.
Yeah, the Chinese claim that's pixelization, but pixelation, as I understand, it's a little different than that because I'm seeing bends, not just breaks. I mean,
Correct.
blocks,
Correct.
you're going to get some of that.
Correct.
It's shifting the blocks, and it was built in blocks, I'm told. So,
Right.
It's highly curious. I could see it failing without it going over the top, if that's the case. And another thing a lot of people aren't aware of is that the basin itself, they raise and lower that water so much, and you know that valley is a very tight, high wall valley with mountains on each side. And basically, what you're doing is you're applying a lot of hydrostatic pressure of the water on that rock and those structures, and you're relieving it, applying it and relieving it, applying it. It's like taking a wire and you bend it and release it, bend it and release it. Well, eventually, that wire breaks. So a lot of that material, especially this flood, might just come off some of these mountains. You could have tsunamis in that place.
Oh yeah, and what people, a lot of the thing that they fail to realize is the hydrographic pressure, basically, from that. So for every 2 feet of altitude you have of that dam or of a water column, you have another pound of pressure. So, if the dam is 200 feet tall, you've got 100 PSI that is trying to work its way out of there. And so when that, shifts a little bit, you get any type of crack or any type of a leak in it, if it's down towards the bottom of the dam, you're going to have over 100 PSI on that. That's going to start spraying out and eroding away at the structure itself. So there's a lot to be concerned about with what's going on with the Three Gorges Dam and in all of the cities, Shenzhen and others that basically depend entirely on the Three Gorges Dam for their power production. So if Three Gorges Dam goes out, lots of China will be dark.
Well, they're already in a crisis mode, in my opinion. If that happens, it's going to be catastrophic.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely catastrophic. 400 million people, more than live in the United States, live below that dam in China. 400 million people would be directly impacted. I'm not saying it would kill them all, but they'll be directly impacted. And if they had to evacuate, where are they going to put that many people? Gosh, when we evacuated New Orleans from Katrina, the people were going all over the United States. We had them here all over Huntsville, hundreds of miles away. They filled hotel rooms and everything, everywhere they went. So how do you accommodate a whole nation of people that are displaced at a time like that? Oh, it would be a catastrophic thing. I hope it does not happen, but we need to be very aware now. We're entering perilous times. And that's why I tell people to be prepared, not scared, to start forming these survival communities, because a lone prepper just don't have a lot of chance on their own. And that's why I say go to hal5spaceaol.com and put tribe in the subject line And if you're interested in helping us with this grid defense, Greg at powergriddefense.org. So, Lee, it's been a very interesting conversation. You and I should have been talking years ago, I suppose.
Yeah, I believe we should. Especially we consider we've both been on the same stomping grounds, because, like, I used to work down at Redstone some myself.
Oh, yeah.
So we've both been there. Just amazed we haven't crossed paths, or maybe we did and just didn't realize it.
Well, actually, I came on your channel once and you showed my aquaponics greenhouse to some of the guys. You showed them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That was like a little over a year ago. So we've crossed paths electronically that way, and we've both been on a lot of the same channels quite a bit. So with Rex and various other channels in the network. So look, I appreciate what you're doing. I really heartily thank you for coming on the channel. I'll provide your links below. I encourage everyone to subscribe to Lee Wheelbarger's channels. Lee is a real hero trying to get these things done. And everyone, take care of yourself. And like I said, don't be scared, be prepared. I do believe we can, no matter how bad it is, get through this. And I even do think, and I did post a video in the Posting Lee, which I said this. I said, don't tread on me. And it was kind of a message to the powers that might be from the CCP to stay away from me. Basically, I told them there's this. I said, look, if this happens in the United States, the survivors are going to be the hardest, toughest people you've ever encountered. And you think you're going to come up here and walk on us? You're going to make us so mad. We're going to wipe you out, then we're going to follow you home. Because we, especially in my neck of the woods, if you listen to my videos, you hear a lot of gunfire and sometimes automatic weapon fire. People around here are getting ready.
Yeah. All over, they're getting ready.
That's right. And even if only 3 million people survive, an eighth of the 20% you're talking about, and if only 1 million of them were able-bodied fighters, that would be the toughest army the world ever saw. If it was just a ragtag militia. I talk about how Andrew Jackson's troops defeated the troops that defeated Napoleon in the Sixth Coalition War, which is the war before Waterloo, the one that sent him to exile the island of Elba. So Andrew Jackson's troops defeated a ragtag bunch of frontiersmen, pirates, businessmen from New Orleans, and a few army regulars, defeated a superior, larger force of what was supposed to have been the toughest troops on earth. So don't mess with us.
Well, it's like Yamamoto said, you cannot invade the continental United States because there's a gun behind every blade of grass.
Behind every blade of grass. Amen. Lee, it's been great. Thank you so much. Let's do it again. And
look forward to it.
We'll have plenty to talk about. So everyone, thank you for watching this far. To tell me that you watched it this far. So hey, let's keep the Constitution rolling. Let's say that in your comments, and I'll know you watched it this far. Anyway, everyone, again, thank you for watching. Thank you, Lee. And Lee, hang on. I will stop the recording now.